Would like to have the slide up there for Todd Saliman, President Todd. I know, Tyler had breakfast this morning. He was here probably at 6 o'clock, and now you're back. 5 o'clock, okay, we're impressed. But thank you. I could tell you a few things about Todd. One is he's a really big fan of slides. And anytime we have a meeting, he says, hey, you know I love slides, so I have to show you my slides. So, Josh, you need to pay attention because this guy is going to have slides. But he's going to talk, and then he'll answer questions. What do you think? Okay. He and Michelle have 2 grown, graduated children who are on the East Coast, and a puppy dog, a golden, who resides with them in Boulder. And word is that you know another guy at the table, Tony Martinez, and he told me something about you and yoga, that you are the real...
So is he.
Okay, so is he. Okay. And I won't put a description to what I might have said. So evidently you're quite stellar in what you do. So is he from Stellar. Okay, so without further ado, I know that you came to hear Todd, and you manage a lot of campuses, I think like about 4 of them, and then you've got the regents, and you all take turns working together for the good of the cause. And we know that you are a real buff from the go and go, and you take care of all things. So a wonderful friend of the university. We're so fortunate to have you as the president. There you go.
Well, hello. It's so great to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much thanks to Marty for inviting me to come again. And you already introduced my wife, Michelle, but she's sitting right there. So thanks to Michelle for joining me today. And Tony Salazar from my office, who we lead each other around. So to answer that question. But anyway, thank you for being here too. How many CU graduates here? And how many have people in their families who are CU graduates? More hand. Yeah. So, but we're great, and so thank you. And I'm a CU graduate too, class of '89. Any '89 class of '89 folks here? Oh, very cool. One, very cool. Anyway, so it's been an incredible thing to get to help lead this amazing university after it has done so much for me over so many years. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the incredible things happening at CU, some basic background information. And I will make sure that we have time for questions because I need to be done at 1:10, right? Is that right? Okay, well, I'm just going to go with that. And so we'll see how. All right, so jumping right in. Whoop. Okay, jumping right in. Okay, so this is just some basic background information about the University of Colorado. We have 4 campuses, as already mentioned, and so CU Boulder, of course, CU Anschutz, down in Aurora, we have UCCS, University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and CU Denver. So system-wide, we have about 68,000 students. And so we are a big operation. We produce about almost 18,000 degrees a year. And so what an incredible thing that is, that we get to impact that many lives, and so many of those people stay in Colorado and become part of Colorado's workforce and economy. We have a budget of about $6.3 billion system-wide, and we have about 27,000 faculty and staff. But when you add in our student employees and kind of our part-time employees, that number goes up to 48,000. We're one of the largest employers of the state, and we kind of bounce around depending on workforce in any given year, but we're one of the very largest employers in the state. And what's really interesting is that we do $1.7 billion of research each year. About $1 billion of that is funded by the federal government. And so when we're hearing about all these changes going on at the federal level, CU is ranked 12th in the nation. CU is ranked 12th in the nation when it comes to research funding of public university systems. So we are an impressive organization that does amazing work. And so when you hear these conversations about federal funding and federal research funding, we are toward the very top of that list of organizations that conducts that kind of research. So I mentioned that we have about 68,000 students. This shows you how that has changed over time. On the top, you see the undergrad versus graduate population of our campuses. On the bottom, you see the resident versus non-resident students. And you can see there that almost 70% of our students system-wide are Coloradans. And so Colorado always comes first at the University of Colorado, and we take it very seriously. I consider the University of Colorado, Colorado's university, and we are committed to serving people from all of Colorado's communities all over the state, and we do a pretty good job of that. There are areas where we need to improve, where we need to serve some communities better, and we are working on that. Here's where you can see the number of degrees we award and how that's changed over time. And I don't have a ton of time, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. This is an incredible slide to me. So when you look at undergraduate degree production in Colorado and who's producing these people who are going to be the future of our state, future of the workforce, about 43% of undergraduate degrees in Colorado are produced by the University of Colorado and our 4 campuses. When you look at master's degrees, it's almost half. When you look at PhDs, there's a PhD. Who are CU PhDs in here? All right. So you all are an incredible bunch. And we produce you can see there, I don't have my reading glasses, so I'm struggling right now. I think it says 67%, it's okay. 67% of the PhDs throughout our state. A really interesting information point is that the CU system-wide budget is really close or more than the budgets of all of Colorado's other higher ed institutions combined. So it gives you an idea of the magnitude of the University of Colorado. When it comes to tuition and fees, I often get asked about tuition and fees and how we compare to our peers. So you can see at CU Boulder for a resident student, tuition and fees is actually slightly below our peers. At UCCS and CU Denver, it's a little bit above. We always want tuition to not go up. We always want tuition to actually be lower. But this is a function of state funding in large part, and I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit too. But as you might know, Colorado, while we have really great support on both sides of the aisle in the legislature for higher education, the Colorado's challenge is that our budget pie is of other states. And so the state is not able to provide an adequate amount of funding to higher education in Colorado. And because of that, tuition looks like it does. And so there are lots of things that we do to try to make college more affordable for folks. One of the biggest things we do is financial aid. And right here you can see that number that I can't see over there on the right-hand side of the screen. And that's a number, 200, what does it say, 200, how much? That, whatever someone said. So So that's the amount of money that we put into financial aid with internal resources at the University of Colorado system. That's more than the state of Colorado puts into financial aid for all higher education institutions throughout the state. So that's an incredible thing. CU puts more money into institutional financial aid than the state of Colorado puts into financial aid for all higher education in Colorado. And so we are deeply committed to making college as affordable as we can, and every year our campuses prioritize investment in financial aid. So over time, online learning and online education has kind of morphed. So we did some of it, as you can see from this chart, prior to the pandemic. And the blue bar on this is the percent of our students who are engaged, who take some of their classes online. The orange bar is our students who take their classes exclusively online. And the gray bar are the students who sit in the classroom and don't take any of their classes online. Well, you can see when the pandemic happened, and we ramped up big time. But what's really interesting is that after the pandemic ended, students continue to want to do some of their learning online. So you can see that the majority of our students either take some of their classes online or all of their classes online. So it's very common where we'll have a student who enrolls at one of our campuses and they'll take a few classes in person and one online or something like that. And this is the new normal for higher education. This is what we and other institutions do now, is we have to have excellent online offerings to meet the needs of our students and their learning needs. So this is one of my favorite slides. I talked about this the other day when I was in Glenn's class talking to his students. This shows the average earnings over, I think it's a 10-year period for our graduates who graduate from different programs at the University of Colorado. And so what's really interesting here, to me, is not necessarily what that top bar is, because I think folks would anticipate that, but what the next 5 bars are. Those are all liberal arts. So Glenn's on this, political science is there, and social sciences. And so when we talk about the value of higher education and people having a good income throughout their lifetime, what's really interesting is that the degrees that result most frequently in these higher incomes are actually these liberal arts degrees over a person's lifetime. And the reason for that is that these are the folks who go to law school or medical school, or they become executives or CEOs or president of the university. I got a degree in political science. And so it's really interesting to think on what people are earning based upon the programs that they pursued. One of the things that sometimes people ask questions about is it worth it to go to college? And we hear that a lot these days. We've done polling on that, and the vast majority of Coloradans actually are very clear that they think that going to college is worth it. They also think that going to college is too expensive, and we don't disagree with that. But when you look at what a college degree does for somebody relative to their earnings, it's really very, very clear. The data are super clear that if the more educated you are, the higher your earnings will be over your lifetime. And I'm very proud that the bars there on the right show that holds very true for CU's alumni as well. And what's really interesting, and it's not on here, is that if you have a college education, not only are you going to be much more likely to earn more, you're going to be much more likely to be employed during an economic downturn. So during economic downturns, and we totally saw this during the recession, people with a college education were much more likely to keep their jobs and remain employed. And the more advanced your degree, the more likely you were to remain employed during that period of time. So how do we spend our money at CU and across the CU system? This gives you a general idea of that portion of our budget that's devoted to our educational mission. So there are three kind of buckets to our budget. One is kind of our auxiliaries like housing and things like that. One is our restricted funds for like research, and the other is for our educational mission. So of that educational mission bucket, about 70% of the dollars are spent directly on academics. Another 12% is for operations and compliance. And so when you're talking about operations, think about the person making sure that we're following the rules on grants. Think about the person responsible for financial aid, or also thinking about the person providing mental health services to our students. That's operations. Then facilities, 8%, maintaining our infrastructure. I wish that number was a little bit higher, honestly, because not all of our buildings are in great shape. And then another 9% for non-academic pieces of the operation. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that Colorado has struggled when it comes to higher education funding. It's bad when the line is above the bars. That means that Colorado isn't keeping up with inflation and enrollment growth at the University of Colorado. But what you can see here, and we've been working really hard on this, is that over the last few years, those bars are actually going up at a pretty good rate. And the distance between that blue line and those bars is actually shrinking a little bit. And that's because we have had terrific success at the legislature over the last few years. And that's a direct result of the outstanding work of the legislators who go to bat for higher education. This year, the state had a $1 billion budget gap. That gap has been closed. They balanced the budget that's moving through the legislature now. But despite having that $1 billion gap, they still increased funding for higher education by 2.5% this year. And while, of course, we wanted more, we were thrilled to get that. And we were thrilled that they were able to do more than what was recommended. And their staff actually recommended that higher education funding be cut, but they increased it, and we're incredibly grateful. Okay. Okay. So what this shows is how state funding per resident student has changed over time at each of Colorado's higher education institutions. So what you want here is for the line to go up, not down. Our line goes down. So if you see there, second from the left, the CU system, that since the year 2000, 2001, that fiscal year, state funding per resident student at CU has declined by some percentage there that I can't see. 36, 35%, something like that. So that means that today, the state is funding us about a third less per resident student than we were getting back in the year 2000. And what's you see that the statewide average amount that's provided to institutions around the state for a resident student is actually higher than what the state provides to the University of Colorado per resident student. And then if you go over a little bit further, next over, and you see CSU, you see that CSU's state funding per resident student is several $1,000s higher than the University of Colorado's funding from the state per resident student. So really interesting information here. And you can see where you don't want to be is on the left side of this chart, because that means that your funding per resident student has gone down the most. So we're second only to the School of Mines. when it comes to state funding per resident student and how that's changed over time. There are two reasons for this. One is a bad news thing and one is a good news thing. One is because the state cuts funding sometimes. Another reason could be that enrollment has, and that's exactly what has happened to us, both things. State funding went down during tough times, but also we enrolled more students. And so we had to spread that money across more students. These institutions on the right, it looks like they're doing great. Well, they actually have a tough reason for being over there on the right, and that's because their enrollment has gone down. And so they spread that money over fewer students. So being on the left side isn't great, but it's okay if your enrollment's going up. Being on the right side looks good, but it might not be if your enrollment's going down. So there's a lot behind this, but I would be happy if we were at zero and we were just receiving what we did back in the year 2000. To get Colorado's institutions of higher education funded at just the average rate level of our peers would cost about an additional $1 billion a year for the state of Colorado. So how much does it cost to produce a degree at the University of Colorado? Not how much do you pay, but how much does it cost to produce a degree for a resident student? So this shows that by campus. So of course it's more expensive to produce a degree at CU Boulder because of the research environment. Faculty are more expensive, and the service level is different on each of our campuses. But what's amazing about this chart, in my opinion, is the gray part of the top bar for CU Boulder is bigger than the gold part. So the gray part shows that non-resident students, revenue from non-resident students pays a larger portion of the cost of educating a resident student at CU Boulder than the state of Colorado covers. Now the biggest piece of covering that cost is the resident student's tuition. But the resident student's tuition pays about half of what it costs to actually educate them. The rest of that cost is covered by non-resident tuition and the state. It's different on each of our campuses, and you can see how that percentage varies by campus. But over half of CU Boulder's operating budget for education is generated by non-resident student tuition. So when you see that student with their Texas license plate, wave and give them a hug, because they are really doing us a solid in Colorado, and we're grateful to them, and hopefully we're giving them a great education as well. So when it comes to how we compare to our peers in funding, this is one where you don't want to be on the right side of the chart, and we're all the way over there on the right. And so what this shows is state funding plus tuition revenue per student, total state funding and tuition per student at CU compared to CU Boulder's peers. And it's really interesting when you look at some of the variation on this chart. And so a few years ago, I went out to lunch with a new regent, and I showed them this chart, and they said, "Where did those folks on the left spend all their money?" Well, I would love to have such problems, but they spend it on all of the things that we wish we could spend more money on. The salaries for our staff, for our faculty, more financial aid, taking better care of our buildings. It's incredible how extraordinary the University of Colorado is, given the level of funding that we receive. And we should all be so proud of what all of our campuses across the state, CU and the other institutions as well, what we accomplish with the resources that we all have in Colorado. So finally, I want to end with, and I'll take some questions, I want to end with what kind of economic impact does the CU system an $11.6 billion economic impact on the state of Colorado. When you combine our two hospital partners on the CU Anschutz campus, University of Colorado Hospital, just that one at CU Anschutz, not all of the UC Health hospitals around the state, just that one, and Children's Hospital. And to be a doctor at the University of Colorado Hospital and at Children's Hospital, you have to be on CU Anschutz faculty. So when you combine those two together, it's about $19.4 billion economic impact. The CU Anschutz campus alone has a larger economic impact on the state of Colorado than the Colorado ski industry. If that gives you something to compare to. So what does this do for Boulder County and for the 2nd Congressional District? Well, this gives you an idea of the economic Colorado has on our community in the 2nd Congressional District. About a $3.5 billion economic impact right in this neck of the woods. And so when we talk about the amazing work that's going on, we are also an incredible part of this community. And so many of us in the room are connected to the university with our students through having gone there, having sent children there, but also maybe working there or having a relationship somehow with the university that has an economic impact on you, your family, your friends, and the broader community. So those are just a few factoids that I wanted to share, and now I have 10 minutes as assigned for questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great.
Yep.
Stay sitting. I'm
Sure.
sorry. One second.
You pick.
Excuse me. Hi, Todd.
Hi there. Who's saying that?
Right here.
Okay. Oh my gosh. It's Dorothy Rupert. So, okay, my first day at the Capitol after I got elected, Dorothy is the one who took me down to the Capitol for my first day after I was elected, and everybody thought I was her intern. So Dorothy, who's done extraordinary things for our state, so it's an honor to have you answer your question.
I love that you came to visit us, and I really appreciate the work you're doing. I love the University of Colorado, and I'm so glad you're there. And could you just tell me, like 30 seconds, I know that's hard, about your family?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So here's Michelle. So we've been married for 28 years or so. We always had to. So our anniversary last year, we look at each other and we're like, now how long has it been? So we've been married for 28 years, and we have these two awesome kids who both went to Whittier, and now one has graduated from college and one is graduating this year. So I'm going to miss the graduations at Denver, UCCS, and Anschutz this year because we're going to our daughter's graduation. So we're super proud parents of our awesome kids, and we have that awesome dog, Sammy, who will bark at you if you come to our door. And he'll be scary, but he's not scary.
A century ago, all the regents, most of the members of the legislature and the governor were all members of the Ku Klux Klan. And they told President George Norland that he had to fire all of his Jewish and Catholic faculty. He refused to do it and got rewarded with a library named after him. So my question is this: what kind of pressures today are coming from right-wing sources, and how is CU meeting them?
So that's the Norland charge. If you've been to our graduation, we actually tell that story at every graduation that we have at CU. So you all really know as much as I do about what's going on. I read the paper just like you do every day. And so what we know is that there have been a variety of executive orders and actions taken from federal agencies to reduce grant funding at universities across the country. A lot of those have been put on pause through temporary or restraining orders, and some of them even permanent injunctions. and some of those are being challenged all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So there is a lot of activity on this front. It's Friday, so I would guess that we're going to have more activity this evening sometime, because that's when these things tend to get released, is on Friday evening. Is that here at CU and CU Boulder, so system-wide, we've had about $25 million of federal grants that have been terminated. That's out of $1 billion. And so those $25 million of cancellations have had a significant impact, of course, on the things that they're funding. But when you look system-wide, the impact hasn't been massive yet. And so what we know is that there are additional things heading our way. We just read early this week that funding at NOAA and NASA is being targeted, and that could have a significant impact at CU relative to Ceres and LASP. And those are our two largest research institutes at the University of Colorado. And so it's relative to other areas that have been targeted. The three that were highlighted by the Trump administration through their executive orders were DEI, transgender funding issues generally, and he called it the Green New Deal, but that doesn't exist, and so it's more like sustainability and climate change. Those executive orders were challenged, and they were put on hold, and then the Supreme Court overturned those holds. And so the Trump administration can reduce funding for grants in those areas if they want to. And so a lot of those impacts that I mentioned at the University of Colorado are in those areas. They're not exclusively related to those three areas, but they're related to them. What our approach has been is that, I've said publicly that we will follow all lawful federal orders, and that we will also not preemptively back away from programs that advance our mission. And so those are the things that's kind of the foundation of how we're approaching this. There's, of course, different levels of risk. And so we are concerned. We rely heavily on our federal funds. We do not have a massive, we're very grateful to those of you who have been part of making our endowment bigger. Our endowment is not massive, and over 95% of it is obligated for specific purposes. We don't have a backup plan. I sometimes get asked, what will happen if federal funding gets cut? Well, the work will stop. People will lose their jobs, the science will stop. And so it's a big deal for us, and so we have to approach it, we cannot be cavalier how we approach this. And so we are approaching it with conviction, but also with an eye toward that risk. One of the things that we're doing right now is we're making sure that we're following all federal law in the area of discrimination and illegal preferences. We have worked really hard for a long time to make sure we're in compliance with the law. We're taking a second look at everything to make sure that we're in compliance right now, so that we can say with confidence when we're required to sign a piece of paper that says that we're complying with all the laws that we are. And the campuses are doing that work right now. So that might be too much, maybe that was too long of an answer, but it's something that's probably what I'm spending the majority of my time on right now. And can I just say that our federal delegation has been really good at engaging on this. We have this terrific state government or federal government relations team. We have a great website with updated information that's available to the public that you all can look at. But our federal delegation and the Republican members of the federal delegation have really been going to bat for CU and for Colorado. And there are people that you might not think of who are really going to bat for CU and the University of Colorado. And we're very grateful for their help.
We hear so often about students graduating with a large amount of debt that they've incurred to pay their expenses. Is this as much of a problem as we hear about? Is it getting worse?
So it's actually getting better. Fewer, the average amount of debt upon graduation is declining, and and it's definitely, but it's a thing. The average amount of debt for a student who graduates with debt from the University of Colorado, and about half of our students graduate with no debt. But the average amount of debt for a student who does graduate with debt is just under $30,000. So when you hear the stories about $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 of debt, that's probably not somebody who went to a state school in any state. As long as you're a resident student and you stay in state for college, your amount of debt will be much, much lower if you have any debt at all. And but it's the private institutions and for students who go out of state to public institutions. Out-of-state tuition at CU is about triple what it is for a resident student. So it costs a lot. And so, but that's a real thing. I think that there's nuance to it. And I always tell folks that they ask me, is it worth to go to some expensive school? And my answer is always, if you can afford it, if you have the money. But it's not worth going, having $300,000 of debt. Come to CU. Go to the school where you're a resident student, and you'll get an excellent education, and you won't be burdened by a huge amount of debt.
President Saliman,
Yes.
Thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate you being here on this beautiful spring day ahead of the spring football game. We really appreciate your leadership of the University of Colorado. Your slides are a good example of your pragmatic approach that's been so effective in working with the regents, the legislature. That's a really good outcome for this current session, I think. As you mentioned, that 2.5% is wonderful. And we really appreciate you being here today. And in your honor, we're going to donate, the Boulder Rotary Club, 100 doses of vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund to try and end polio for good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
So, did you hire the new chancellor? Was that you? He and I went to high school with each other. What were you thinking? We got stuff we could talk about later.